So welcome to the course. Like I said before, my name is Eric Chevrier, and I'm going to be the course instructor. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through the course, and we're going to generate some discussion, and hopefully it could get you interested in topics related to food and sustainability. I hope I could make you feel comfortable about the course altogether going forward. And we're going to have a good time together, even though we're doing this online. Usually I do this in person with other people. So just to begin, I'm going to show you where to access the information, and I'm going to share my screen with you. I just got to find the screen sharing option here, and there we go. So I'm going to share this. This is the website that I've created for the course itself. You could find the URL at ericchevrier.ca. And all of the course content is going to be on this site. Although I'm also going to be putting the links on Moodle as well, because you all have access to Moodle. And part of the, I guess, negotiations with Concordia itself is that we should be uploading stuff to Moodle. I have designed my own site and been using this site since I've been teaching at Concordia for about 9 years now. And it's a lot easier for me to access the information, to share things, and to actually keep everything up to date. So I'm going to be using this, although I will be putting links on Moodle as well that you could access. So this is the course website here, where basically my general website for the work that I do, and I guess other things as well, research and other projects that I'm into. So I'm going to start here just to familiarize with the course itself. You could go to Take Course, and it's going to bring you right to the course page here, okay? So just to show you, you could actually access the course through other ways also. So if you want to, you could actually go to the top here and you could actually access the course where it says, I can't even click on the link because I am blocked by the participants. Okay, there we go. So if I go to courses, I could access the course that way as well. And if I go to this link right here, it's going to bring me to the course website, just like that. Just to show you, because some people might have questions about that. Oh, it says that people are in the waiting room. Okay, I think I've admitted people in the waiting room. This is the first bug that we figured out. Great, so hopefully now you're all in the room. Okay, so you could access the course by clicking on either of these links. And if you click on this link here, what is going to happen is you're going to get to this user registration page. So the user registration page itself, you don't need to register to the course. You could actually just go to the other link. You could register if you want to. It'll gain access to all of the information, but you don't need to do that. You could actually just access the course by clicking on this link here. So for those of you that were in the waiting room, welcome. I began describing how to access the course material by going to the site here. So I don't know who's in the room at that point. Like I said, if you were in the room or not, I'm not sure. There may be a little bit, or there may be some bugs here and there trying to figure out how to make everything workable online. So just bear with me and I'll have patience for all of you also. Hopefully you are all now in the room, apparently before some of you were in the waiting room. So the video is actually accessible. I'm going to make it accessible to everybody. Like I said at the beginning, if you were in the room, I'm going to be recording the lecture portion of this class, and then the discussion portion I'm not going to be recording because I want people to share information with each other and be able to be comfortable when they're discussing very heavy topics, when we're going to be talking about things related to this course here. So to access the material, you go to the food and sustainability portion of my website, so ericchevrier.ca, and this is what it's going to look like here when you access it. Like I said before also, if you were in the waiting room, you probably didn't hear me say this, but just to reiterate, the material is also on Moodle, because part of the conditions of teaching remotely is Concordia wants us to upload everything to Moodle. Now, I'm using my own website for the course content, Although I will be putting stuff on Moodle also. Mainly, it probably will direct you to the site, or it'll direct you to like the course syllabus or other things like that. So feel free to log into Moodle if you're more comfortable there, but I would say the easiest direct fashion to obtain the course material is to go to ericchevrier.ca and then just access the course. So just really quickly, once again, if you get to the main site, right here on the front page, you're gonna see take this course or take course. And as soon as you click on it, it's gonna bring you all to the course material here. All right, so now that you are in the course, at the top, I've tried to make it as easy as possible to access the things that are relevant for you. So here I put a link to email all assignments here. So this is actually an email account that I've created through my server that is only for this course. So at times it's very hard when I have a lot of students to keep up with emails, especially if they're coming into my regular account. Because I get quite a few emails in a day. So I've actually dedicated a whole email account just for this course here. You click on this URL, it's gonna bring you to a page that you could actually email directly to me. So as you'll see later on, maybe just to let you know now, I'm gonna be asking you to submit your assignments to this email address, but also to upload it onto the Google Drive, which I've created for this course also. So you could access my email address by just clicking on this, and it's going to send me an email. You could go to the Google Drive also, and just to show you what I've created here is created a Google Drive for this course. So it contains ways for you to submit the assignments, but it also contains our attendance list for today and every single course. And also the discussions that we're going to be participating on are on this drive also. So just to show you upload assignments, if you go to this page here, what it's going to bring you to is all of the assignments that are due. You could just click on each of the days. So for example, if you're going to submit the first assignment here on July 20th, I think is the first one. Actually, sorry, it was the 13th, but regardless, you could just come and upload your assignment to this drive. You could give me access if you don't want to give other people access, or you could just make it accessible for whoever's in the drive. What I'm going to do is, as of the due date, at the time that I've said, which is I think 11:30 before each of the classes, I'm going to cut off the uploadable portion. So basically the drive is going to be closed, and all of your assignments should hopefully be uploaded by that point. The safest thing to do is actually to upload the assignment to the Google Drive, but also to email it to me at the address that I showed you up here also. If you do both, then I'll definitely be able to get it. But it also avoid confusion as to sometimes people say they uploaded it onto the drive, but maybe it didn't come through properly or other things happen because of technology. So if you upload it to the drive assignment folders, as well as email it to me here, then that would be great, and I'll have it in 2 places. The other thing that I've created is Google Drive for the classes. So each class will have a different drive allocated towards it. And as you'll see within this, you're going to have an attendance form. So this is today's class here. You have an attendance sheet that I'm going to ask everyone to eventually sign today. But also you have in-class assignments that we're going to be doing together. So like I said before, part of the class is going to be a lecture portion and the other part is going to be participatory. A good part of this course is actually getting you to reconnect with food. So what do I mean by reconnect? Some of you may have some connection to food processing. Maybe some of you are food distributors, you work in restaurants. Some of you may have experience transforming food, cooking at home, baking bread, doing different things when it comes to food. Some of you grow food. I've actually seen on the Facebook group. Some of you may have gardens or other things like that. But what I'm encouraging you to do is to connect with food. Okay, so I'm going to give you different assignments to have discussions in class, and then I'm going to give you some assignments to take home and basically do things on your own time. And then basically we're going to come back and discuss kind of the results of your experiment. A couple examples is actually this class. I'm going to get you all to plant a seed between now and next week when we meet on Monday. I would like you all to grow 1 plant by the end of this course. So it seems kind of trivial for people that actually do gardening, but what I've realized actually in teaching this course for a couple years now is a lot of people don't have experience in food production. And this is quite a fundamental process. We need to reconnect with our food processes. Some of you may work in community gardens or in farming, or maybe have your own balcony gardens. That's great. And I'm going to teach you a little bit about how to do that. So actually, if you have a little bit of impetus and maybe some space and some time, you could actually go and engage and do this on your own. Some of you that maybe won't carry through this will at least get some experience in the class and understand how to connect to your food cycles. So for example, here, if I go to this course, I have 3 different templates of questions that we're going to be going through eventually. And these are question templates. They're non-editable, because what I want people to do is to create their own Google document. And when you're discussing with other people, you're going to actually be uploading onto this Google document and working together through Zoom and through the Google Docs at the same time. So you're taking notes, discussing with your group, and answering the questions in conversation through different breakout groups through this Zoom application. So just for example here, one of the templates is going to ask you about your own experience in food. And here, for example, it asks you about your name, tell the group about yourself in a minute. What type of food consumer are you? What's your least and favorite food? What kind of specific dietary needs do you have? Are you a conscious food consumer? Why or why not? These are things that maybe you've thought of, maybe you haven't. And then I ask you about different experiences when it comes to food production. So producing food, transforming and processing food, preserving food, and managing food waste. So what you would do in your group is actually copy this here and then create your own Google Doc that you're going to call whatever it is. So you're going to come up with a group name on the spot, name it that, put it in this drive here, and then actually put the names of all the people in the group, and then I could see your participation on real time, because I'm going to be jumping in and out of the groups. But at the same time, I could go back and actually find out what you were discussing within your groups. So when I go through the portion where I'm actually assigning participation credits, this is a big part of it, is actually I could see who's participating in the discussions, who's participating in the little, I guess, experiments or whatever we want to call them that you're doing on your own, and then how they actually worked out for you. So these are the templates, but as you'll see also within each of the classes, I'm going to have an attendance form. So what I will do is actually, as the class populates, I can see actually some people probably have already put their names in, because I do see that there are some names already in the attendance form. So great, you're one step ahead of me, yay. So you put your name in here, you put your student ID, and then I'd like you to put the name of the breakout group also, because I'm going to be seeing if you're actually partaking in the conversation. If you're not actually here during the participation part of the course, then you're not going to have a name of a breakout group. And I guess this is the only really mechanism I have, because I know people could just kind of sign in, put their name in and leave, and it's really hard for me to figure out if they actually attended the course or not. So name of the breakout group is important, because then I could actually go and see who's participating and how they're participating with others as well. After the class is done, I'm going to close the attendance form so that people can't go to it after the class and fill it out. Basically just to make sure that people are actually attending the course. Now, like I said at the beginning, this class is very heavily based on participation. I know it's an online course right at the present moment. Usually the course is not a remote course, but is actually done in person. But unfortunately, because of COVID, we don't have the option to meet in person in a safe manner. So this is the safest way that we could do this presently. But with that, I do want you to engage with us, and I do want you to be part of the course and to discuss, participate in the experiments and the other things that we're going to be doing in the course also. So to get back to my website here where all the course content is going to be, I've created a Facebook account, or Facebook group, I guess. I know not everybody's on Facebook. You don't need to be on Facebook. I really wish there was a better platform for us to be sharing information. And there probably is. I'm not aware of all of the platforms that exist currently, but I will be looking into other ones eventually. For now, this is one that does function. So if you click on this link, you could actually join our Facebook group. You can participate in conversations outside of class. Also, We can share different information about, results of your experiments that you're doing when it comes to growing food and transforming food and things like that, but also just to share things related to food and sustainability, or other things that you want to share with the group. I post jobs on there from time to time related to food and sustainability. I post different things about community food networks and other things that might be interesting for you. So I encourage you to join the Facebook group, but it's not necessary, especially if you're not on Facebook. Just don't worry about it. It's okay. Most of the information is going to be shared here also. You want to download a hard copy of the course syllabus, you can download it right here. You just click on this link and it's just going to download into basically a PDF form, and you can keep that also. But as you see here on this page, I have the course syllabus laid out, and you could actually come refer to it at any point if you would like to. So what is this course about? Is we're going to be looking at food and sustainability. And, in, I guess, just a very superficial fashion, it seems that that's actually quite an easy topic to deal with. Well, we all discuss aspects of sustainability. It's quite a buzzword of today, as we're looking at what is a sustainable business, what are sustainable practices. To some extent, we're going to look at this word as being quite overused in a lot of contexts, and becomes quite confusing, because when people talk about sustainability, most of the time they're referring to environmental sustainability, but actually the word sustainability refers to the self-perpetuation or the perpetuation of some kind of thing. So a lot of businesses or a lot of people that are actually talking about sustainability use that to their advantage, in the way that some companies will say that they're a sustainable company, although they do a lot of environmental destruction. They're a solvent company. They perpetuate over time. So technically they are sustainable in the business operations, but are they sustaining, the conditions for us to be able to perpetuate in the future would be quite debatable in a lot of ways. So we're going to look at defining food and sustainability, and we're going to look at different theories revolving around that. But also I want to get into more practical context also, because this course is not just about learning about foods and sustainability, but it's also about creating sustainable practices on an individual basis. So I'm going to encourage you to all adapt more sustainable practices. But at the same time, we're going to be looking at this as to, how can we actually communicate, and how can we engage ourselves into the community where we're going to actually devise sustainable practices through the workings of this course also. So I'm going to get into a little bit of action research and how the things that we're going to be doing in this course will hopefully lead to more sustainable food futures. I guess to also to iterate about the confusion when it comes to talking about food and sustainability. So sustainability is quite a confusing term. Like I said, it talks about the perpetuation of a thing, but also just defining food becomes complicated. And a lot of people maybe don't think about this, but what is food altogether? There's not a common understanding about what food is universally. People eat different things across the world. And actually some things that could be food related in other places in the world will not be considered food. So just even defining food becomes complex. In Canada or United States, insects are not necessarily considered food. But you go to certain places in Asia where, it is common practice to eat insects. What we could say is things that actually will be, a health concern, things that are poisonous, especially immediately poisonous, or, poisonous to our very being in the immediate future, we don't consider food because it's quite toxic and doesn't help sustain us over time. But there is not necessarily common understanding about what food is, besides the things that we avoid, things that will actually kill us at the present moment. If we actually look culturally, people eat different things in different places, and it's produced differently in different contexts throughout the world. So we're going to be learning about what food means and actually how that connects to us as people and connects to our social surroundings and comes to define who we are in our social context. How do we define ourselves individually has a lot to do with food also. You actually look at how people define themselves culturally. Food has a big aspect of that. We have, cultural understandings about what types of food are, like Italian foods or Asian foods or other types of foods, and they come to define our cultural understandings as well. So things that seem quite trivial are actually quite complex, and we're going to look and break down the complexity of all of these systems and all of these meanings and understandings. So anyway, so if we're going to look at what sustainable diets are, when we think of this, it could be quite a confusing term. So if I ask you the question, is your diet sustainable? You know, what kind of things do you think about when I say that? You might actually think about, well, is it sustaining me as a person? Are we sustaining the planet and our social context through the food consumption that we have? Are we sustaining a healthy economy? What are the things that we're sustaining through food? So instead of asking this question here in either rhetorical or a very direct fashion, is your diet sustainable? We could actually redress the question and ask what types of consequences? So positive and negative consequences. Some are intended consequences and some are unintended consequences that we are aware of, and sometimes we're not aware of them. And then I guess to add to this, some of them are on a micro scale and some are on a macro scale. So when we really break down this idea of food and sustainability, what we really need to do is actually look at the types of consequences that we're bringing in the world by the diets that we have and by the practices that go into the food that's being created for our consumption. Okay? So positive and negative consequences. Let's just say we're going to take GMOs, for example. Well, we could say, you know what? Some GMOs have provided food for certain places through different regions of the world where maybe it was hard to gain aspects of, you know, or growing food, let's just say in Africa or other places in the world where there's been droughts or deserts or other things like that. So, you know, you have Bill Gates Foundation or other foundations that have basically been NGOs to go and try to do food relief. So a lot of people will say, well, there's positive consequences brought in because of those actions. And because of that, it's positively sustainable. But then you could look at the flip side too and say, well, you know, by giving people charity, they're actually relying on external factors, and it makes it difficult for them to sustain their own food networks internally. So if charities actually break down, or world institutions start breaking down that provide these charities, then people would no longer have the ability to feed themselves in certain areas of the world. So we could look at positive and negative consequences. It doesn't mean that one is more important than the other, but we could actually kind of weigh these things with each other. So some consequences are intended and unintended. For example, you know, I guess looking at kind of the charity situation with GMOs, I would believe that there is actually good impetus from some people to actually help people in impoverished nations feed themselves. So sometimes the intentions are good. But then other unintended consequences are created also. So when GMOs are used, we're basically restricting access to food across the world also, because GMOs require patents. They require also companies with large sums of money to be able to purchase the patents. And because of that, it actually restricts access to food across the world. So there are unintended consequences also based on sometimes actions that are supposed to be positive. And we have to address also that sometimes we're aware of these consequences and sometimes we're not. Sometimes they're direct consequences because of our intentional volition, but sometimes they're actually just kind of products of the cultures or the societies that have already been created. You know, in Canada and United States, we abide by capitalist modes of economics. And a lot of times the institutions that have been created under capitalism have some negative effects on, you know, people and societies. Just for example, you know, this whole idea about global trading. Canada subsidizes and the United States largely subsidizes their agricultural industries. And because of that, we produce a lot of cheap food commodities that we basically sell to the rest of the world. Countries that do not subsidize their agriculture as much as Canada and the United States sometimes can't compete with these prices. And what they call food dumping is basically taking cheap food commodities and bringing it into places of the world to, you know, in some extent provide, you know, what can be considered positive consequences of giving cheap food to places in the world where it's a little bit more expensive or harder to produce. But also some of these consequences are quite negative. And, you know, especially looking at some movements that have come out of Mexico, in particular, La Via de Campesina, started to address issues of food dumping in Mexico because places like Canada and the United States are bringing cheap food commodities, which made it very inaccessible for their farmers to actually sell to the markets in Mexico. And a lot of these farmers were not able to maintain their food industry and basically went bankrupt or were no longer able to operate anymore. Now, this is a product of things that sometimes we're unaware of because these things operate in a very large context, and sometimes we don't actually think about these daily things that exist in capitalism or world institutions. So, we could see that there are negative effects produced by dumping cheap food commodities. Sometimes this is intended because companies actually do want to gain other markets or other contexts to buy out other farmers. So sometimes it's intended. Sometimes it's unintended. We don't necessarily want people to be starving across the world, but because of the mode of production that we have, capitalist mode of production, that, this kind of mode of production encourages firms to get larger and to buy out other firms. So these things sometimes we're not aware of. We're not necessarily thinking about these things in our daily food consumption. So this is the type of sustainability that I want us to think about. I want us to not think about, is it sustainable, and just kind of provide a yes or no response to it, but start asking us these questions about positive, negative consequences, intended, unintended consequences, things that we're aware of and not aware of, and then to bring it to a macro and a micro scale. We have direct context over what we put in our bodies. You could refuse food. You don't have to eat the food that's in front of you. I guess maybe if you're starving, you don't have as many options, sure. But one of the first things that we do as a mode of our own existence is actually we could refuse food. And what you'll see is actually toddlers gaining a sense of control over their own identity by refusing food from their parents. And sometimes these things actually last throughout our lives as we develop food understandings based on conditioning responses that actually start at a very young age. Anyhow, so these are the things that I want you to start thinking about, are the consequences of the actions about our food production, our consumption, and other things that we engage with when it comes to food. So here I put a couple questions. We could actually go into many different questions, but I say digging deeper, we could ask, what are the conditions of labor of the farmers that produce our food? If you look at Canada right now, a good majority of our food is actually migrant laborers that come to Canada for the summer and produce food in the farms because of many different things. Actually, the farmers are using this as a form of exploitation in a way that they could get people to work very cheap. And a lot of these workers are quite efficient when it comes to their working standards compared to maybe people in Quebec and Canada. They're very efficient workers. They're a group that's actually been heavily exploited. If you actually look at the migrant laborers that have come to Canada since COVID, a lot of them are actually catching COVID and are put into conditions where social isolation is not possible. Their sleeping quarters are in very tight quarters and they're working very close in proximity to each other. So the way that we produce food has a lot to say about the conditions of labor, in Canada, but across the world. If we're actually looking at structural inequalities of food, we could see actually that a lot of our food is made by migrant laborers, but also made by people in the global south. So our food industry relies on structural racism and other things to be able to produce food at the costs that we actually pay for them in Canada. We do not pay the true cost for food because of all the ways that we've subsidized it and exploited people in the process of gaining access to food. We can also look at ingredients in food and how it contributes to our health. So part of food and sustainability is actually sustaining ourselves. We don't eat food, we'll eventually die. We have to eat food. So part of this is about individual sustainability as well. But then we have collective sustainability. So it's not just about my individual health, but it's the health of our communities and our societies that we need to look at also. So environmental footprints, we can look at carbon footprints. Food is a major culprit when it comes to climate change. You actually look at things like the Amazon rainforest burning down. A lot of this has to do with slash and burn techniques, where basically at the end of the season, farmers will slash their crops and actually burn them to put carbons back into the soil, which is a practice that's been used actually across the world for quite some time. Although the conditions now to do that, it's very hard to control these forms of fires because the conditions in the Amazon, especially, it's a rainforest, but it's actually becoming more arid and dry. And the conditions for slash and burn are not necessarily what they were before. If you actually look at companies like Cargill, they're actually cutting parts of the Amazon rainforest in order to grow soy. Why are they doing this? Is actually because the Amazon has got very fertile land. It's actually uncultivated land that is really good for growing food. But in the process of doing that, we're destroying one of the biggest, what they call carbon sinks. So carbons are actually brought into the ground through plants and trees and things like that. Rainforests are a very big way to sequester carbons And what are we doing? We're actually using this fertile soil to kind of cut down the trees, sell them to logging companies, and then at the same time grow soybeans. And actually, if you look particularly at Cargill, their main form of growing of soybeans is to actually feed to animals. So we're basically, cutting down the Amazon rainforest, and a good part of that is going to feed people meat. So these things do not breed global conditions of sustainability. We're noticing across the world, if you actually look at this, is Siberia, which is actually supposed to be a very cold climate, is right now is on fire and actually having heat waves where they're getting very, very high temperatures. And I don't know the exact temperature today, but it was like up about 30 degrees Celsius in the Arctic. So we're experiencing conditions of climate change exacerbated on other world problems that we're currently facing. These things are not sustainable, and food is a major culprit to climate change. We need to figure out better ways of producing food. And these are things we're going to be discussing as well. So what are some social inequalities expressed through food consumption? I've talked about a little bit already about conditions of labor especially, but also exploitation of people across the world in order for us to get food. I'm not going to read through this whole thing here, but I'm just going to highlight a couple things. So we're going to be discussing how, we're going to look at class, gender, race relations when it comes to the way that we interact with food. We're going to look at conditions of the biosphere. We're going to look at culture. We're going to look at health. We have a very strange context, especially in the United States and Canada, where we have issues with obesity, but at the same time, we have issues with starvation and malnutrition. These things are existing together. Like I said, also part of this course, we're going to be engaging with food and sustainability. So I live in Lachine and have worked with the city of Lachine to try to improve the foodscape here. And I would actually like us to do that through different things in the course also. Some of the assignments that I'm be describing later, you're going to notice that what we're going to try to do is actually make the city of Lachine, or the borough, I guess it's not really part of Montreal, we're going to try to improve the borough of Lachine through some of the active engagement and some of the assignments that we're going to be doing. I know some of you might think that I can't do this because I'm not in Canada right now, or I'm not in Quebec, or this is really far away. Well, there are ways to engage remotely through especially one of the assignments. This is the final assignment that I'm going to be describing later on, that we could all do even remotely. But I'm also going to encourage you through other assignments to come to Lachine if you can and get involved in some of the projects that I'm involved with, basically either volunteering on the local community gardens, or in different food banks or things like that. Now look, I'm not going to make you do things that are going to put you at in an uncomfortable situation. I don't want anybody to jeopardize their health or to do anything that compromises any comfort that you might have. So we'll actually follow the situation with COVID. If there are an increase in cases and it looks like things are going to be a little bit more difficult to manage or to maintain, then we're going to take this with whatever we can, and I'm not going to force you into a situation where it becomes dangerous by any means. Okay. I see people entering into the chat. That's okay too. If you want to post questions, that's fine. So could we engage with food banks in our own neighborhoods? Yes, I will allow you to do that also. So if you do want to engage with your own neighborhood, that's definitely something that's great. I encourage you to get involved in any kind of food venture if it's close by. I guess I wanted to kind of meet some of you, and considering that I'm not going to be able to meet you in person, it would be good if you could actually participate in some of the things that we're going to be doing in and around Lachine. But the only thing that I'm going to be requiring you to do that engages with Lachine is the interview with a food group in Lachine, and this could be done remotely. So it doesn't have to be about you coming here and engaging in a physical sense, but could be done either through Zoom or through phone calls or whatever the case is. Okay, so we're going to be improving things, hopefully. We're going to be causing sustainable futures for us and the communities that we're part of, okay? Part of the course, though, we're also going to be examining the food practices in ways of actually looking at more of the food systems themselves and how we've devised the food systems and what this actually implies when it comes to understanding sustainable relations. There's been a lot of debate when it comes to GMOs, and a lot of people will say, well, GMOs are safe or they're not safe or whatever the cases are. There is evidence that there are harmful effects of GMOs when it comes to our physical health, but there's so many other factors that people don't consider in this debate. GMOs actually limit biodiversity because you're creating seeds that actually are patented to actually be the same seed, and they're selling pretty much the same varieties. And what that does is actually limits the biodiversity. And in order to have a sustainable future when it comes to the world, we actually need biodiversity. We need, different species of plants. We need different species of insects and other things as well. And, one thing that GMOs were one of the major culprits, or one of the major negative factors that is promoted, is actually limiting biodiversity. So we're going to look at that in kind of a larger fashion, and we're going to come up with an actual critique that's not, rooted in just conjecture, but actually looking and deconstructing what the usage of GMOs is and actually how that impacts on food and sustainability. We're also going to look at companies like Bayer and Monsanto and some of, let's just say, what we're going to consider the culprits. And I'm not saying that to, insert my own opinion necessarily, but if you actually look at some of these companies are actually involved in very, very bad things when it comes to in their involvement in the world. Just one example, Bayer used to be part of a group called IG Farben, who is manufacturing Zyklone B for the world wars and basically using this in the gas chambers. And they're not the only industry player that was doing that. A lot of these companies that are actually manufacturing pesticides were actually involved in the wars and involved in manufacturing weapons of mass destruction or chemical weapons, basically. And after the World Wars, repurposed a lot of this stuff to be now part of our food system. So we're going to look at different movements. Like, I don't want this to be about negative things all the time, because there are positive things that are going on presently also. We have collective gardens in Montreal even. We have people that are actually looking at sustainable food endeavors. We have groups that are doing things that are alternative, like a group called Le Détour in Point St. Charles that have basically made a food distribution co-op. Other places in NDG, like the Food Depot, are doing really wonderful things when it comes to community food sovereignty. So we're going to look at these things, and we're going to look at other global movements also. So La Vieta Campesina is a group from Mexico that basically has pushed the elements of food sovereignty and basically have created conditions of sustainable functioning for their farmers and the peasants in Mexico and the global south. So we're going to look at these movements also. And what I want to orient you to do is not necessarily look at the gloom and doom, but actually look at ways of changing and ways of developing sustainable food futures. And I would say, post-COVID, or whatever we want to call this, economic system, we're going to have to redress how we actually envision food. One, because our food practices are extremely environmentally destructive at the present moment. But also what we're looking at is breakdowns of food chains. In ways that we can't necessarily rely on air travel and other forms of, importation as much. It means that we're going to have to rely on more localized systems eventually. And I know that's not necessarily at the forefront right now, but depending on what happens with COVID and what happens in the world political economic system, I would say it would be in their best interest to localize as much of our own food as possible. So part of this course, like I've already said, is going to be engaging and enhancing our own lives and the lives of our community through our own actions. By doing things in the world, we create conditions. By doing labor in certain ways, we're actually creating things that come into existence. If you're a food producer, you could see it directly. You grow a tomato plant, you produce tomatoes. Whatever you're working in actually has fruits of labor. Basically, it has things that come about. And what I'm encouraging everybody to do is to think about the practices that they're engaged with. Labor practices, consumption practices, whatever you're doing actually creates different conditions. Some of them, on a larger scale than others. But what I'm saying is that if we reorient ourselves to have more sustainable lives, especially when it comes to food, we're going to improve the conditions around us, in ourselves, and our community also. Okay, so that was a little bit of a rant, but considering I'm not going to be taking questions at the present moment unless you put it on the group chat, then I'm just going to continue through, and then we're going to have some engagement later on. and I'm going to get to know a little bit more about you all. Okay, so the course material, I have 3 books, and just to show you what they are here. So one is Critical Perspectives in Food. This one here I ordered to the library, but unfortunately the library can't get access to this one on PDF form. The company told them that individuals have to purchase this and basically they could give it to them virtually, but you could also order a physical copy if you want. Also, I tried my best to make this in PDF form that was free to you all, but I was not able to get it to the library. So just to let you know, this book here, you have to order through the publishing company. You could purchase it if you want to. You could purchase a hard copy, or if you're internet savvy enough, you might be able to get it other ways, but that's up to you. Here's another book that I'm going to be assigning as well. This one is called The Nourished Planet. This is going to be available at the library. This is in PDF form. The library told me that you're going to be able to just get it from them in PDF version, so you don't have to physically go into the library. You'll be able to get a copy of this. Great. And we're going to read this one also, which is A Foodie's Guide to Capitalism, Understanding the Political Economy of What We Eat. This one we're going to read pretty much the entire book. The other ones, there's excerpts and different chapters from the book, but we're not going to read the entire book. We're going to read parts, bits and pieces of it. But this one here, we're going to read the entire book. So you're going to see actually the readings are listed in the course syllabus, and I'll go over that with you also. Okay, so there are other suggested readings here that I put, but you don't necessarily have to read them. This is for your own understanding and involvement. If you want to go past what I'm assigning, then that's great. I highly encourage you to do so, but you don't need to purchase these books or acquire them in any way. Okay, so like you probably understand through the emails that I've sent out, this is a remote course. I would like to give this course in person, but right now that is not safe for any of us to be in a classroom together. So for the present moment, we're not going to be meeting together. We're going to be doing this virtually. But the way that I'm going to be conducting this is not like an eConcordia course where I just upload things, you listen to it, and then regurgitate it back to me in, a fashion of like an exam or whatever the case is. I want this to be interactive. I want us to pretend that this is an actual real class here. Certain portions will be lecture portions and will be made available to you, like I said. And other times we're going to have discussions. But what I want is you to engage. So I want you to perform the experiments that I'm asking you to do. If you're successful, that's great. If not, then that's fine also. Then we're going to figure out what went wrong and how to improve that for next time. But I want you to come out of this with the ability of growing a plant, making your own bread at least, and sourdoughs, understanding how to repurpose certain foods, and be somewhat food autonomous or food sovereign. When I'm saying somewhat, I know you're not going to all become master bakers or perfect cooks or grow really big gardens, but I'm going to encourage you to do the most you can. And I think that going forward, people are going to have to re-engage with home economics, it seems, in the post-COVID world also. With restaurants closed up until recently, you probably have all learned to cook a little bit from time to time, or make bread or other things as well. So these things, I want to instill you with certain understandings of actually how to be as food autonomous as possible. So I'm going to be lecturing. I might have some guest speakers on. I'm not sure because I know this takes up other people's time also. But I might do this in a podcast fashion and have like some kind of a discussion with a group of people and then make that available to you. So instead of having a lecture, maybe you'll watch that. I am devising the course as I'm doing this to be remote. I've given this course before, but mainly in person. So it's going to be a learning experience for all of us, but hopefully this all works out really well. I'm pretty media savvy, so it shouldn't be much of a difficulty with me engaging with media, and hopefully all of you will be okay with that too. But I do want you to come and engage with us during class time. And I know that some of you were not necessarily looking for that when you're registering for the course. You might have wanted to do this on your own time. And that's understandable. There's a lot going on now, especially with the pandemic and everything. But I do want this to be an in-person course as much as possible. I'm allocating 10% of your grade to the participation. So, it's not much, but it is something hopefully that incentivizes you to be here and to actually participate in all of the experiments that we're doing. Okay, so I see a couple questions coming up here. So before I move on, I'm just going to address them. So it says, for critical perspectives in food studies, can we get the 2012 edition? That's a good question. So I'm not sure if the 2012 edition contains the chapters that I'm looking for. If they do, then that's great. I guess you could get the 2012 edition. So basically the part that we're looking at here is part 5, which is food for the future. And the chapters that we're going to be reading are from that. So, yeah, am I right? Yes. So we're going to be reading from that section. And if those chapters are contained within the book, then 2012 should be good. But we'd have to double check because I don't have a version of 2012 on me. I only have the 2017 version. Okay, so another question. Has anyone been able to get a link for critical perspectives on food? Emailed the bookstore twice and haven't got a reply. Also, the physical book would not come in time for the week the readings are due. Is it possible to share it with the rest of us and get a picture of the pages we need to read? So just to let you know, I am obliged to not provide any copyrighted material to the course. Just because of the conditions that Concordia kind of set for the course, I shouldn't be violating any copyright infringements. Although I'm not going to regulate the Facebook group, so you could all do whatever you want with it, and that's up to you. I'm not suggesting anything necessarily, but whatever, I'll leave that up to you to regulate however you want. I've already had it for other courses I've taken. Got it on Amazon. You could buy it secondhand. Yes, you could actually buy it on Amazon if you want to. You could buy it secondhand for sure. I don't necessarily encourage the purchase of Amazon just because of their appalling labor conditions, and even during COVID, they were not necessarily the greatest company when it came to respecting labor, although maybe it is the only choice at this point. I sent you all an information about getting the book a while back just so that you had the heads up on it, although I don't know if you all received my communication. Hopefully you did. Anyhow, so you can buy it wherever you want. I'm not going to judge you. Do as you wish. So some people are saying they found it on VitalSource, great. And I think the 2012 edition's on VitalSource. Just make sure that the, I guess the edition contains the chapters that we're looking at here. So we're not fans of Amazon, but you got your used copy there. That's great, perfect. Okay, I see some people posting in the chat here. I'm gonna continue with the course, and if there are questions that are relevant, I'm gonna come back to them. But feel free to post your questions there. I'm just going to describe here the way that you're going to be evaluated in the course and then go through the different assignments. Excuse me. Okay, so like I told you, your participation for the course, which means coming to the course, assigning the attendance, but also participating in the discussions, this is going to be worth 10% of your grade. Okay, so it's not anything that's going to make or break your grade if you have to miss a couple courses, which is understandable, but it incentivizes you coming to class and actually participating with us. So part of your grade is actually based on your participation. Doesn't mean just show up, but it means actually engage with people, especially when it comes to doing the group discussions and breakout groups and things like that. Sustainable Food blog, or Sustainable Food Choices blog. So this here is described below, and I'm going to provide more of a grading rubric and actually an explanation of the assignment next course, but just to kind of get you started here. Sustainable Food Choices blog. I would like you to think about how individuals can make better food choices and look at sustainability in the way that I've defined it up top. So basically, what are the conditions going into your food? And how do we actually improve the conditions, or how do we actually improve our communities and ourselves through the food choices that we make, okay? So this is looking at a microcosm. We're looking at individual responsibility. And this is not the be and end all about food and sustainability. Actually, a lot of the stuff we're going to be looking at is coming from more of a macrocosm and actually addressing structural issues with our food system. But also, you know, part of this is doing things as an individual also. We could do things to improve our own conditions in our immediate fashion when it comes to our own health and our own communities. So you're going to pick a topic when it comes to that, and you're going to write a blog. So what does a blog mean? It means something that's accessible to people, that's fun to write. But a blog does not mean make it up on the spot and just put on your own 2 cents without doing research. So although I'm calling this a blog, I do want you to do proper research, and I want you to have proper sourcing, okay? So not like a make it up on the spot blog. You're going to do your research, and you're going to actually provide your citations within the blog, so that if anybody's interested in the topic, they could actually go and then, figure out how to go and obtain the sources that you've looked at, and hopefully convince them to change their food habits. So you're looking at least 5 reliable, valid sources, okay? Which means that just don't go to anybody's make it up on the spot blog and just source them, but actually look at proper research that's been done on food related topics. So look at, either peer-reviewed journals or other things. It doesn't always have to be peer-reviewed journals, but things that are credible, valid sources. And I'll discuss what that means later on. But basically do proper research and then make your interpretation and write a blog about that. I'm saying about 600 words, it could be about 600 to 1,000 words. Over about 1,000 to 1,200 words makes it very difficult for the reader to kind of engage with for a long time. But, I would say if you keep it to 6,000 to 1,000 words, that should be fine. I'm not going to be word counting, but just do it as you think. People could actually submit this not just in written form, but could it be a video production, or it could be in other ways of expressing yourself. But if you want to do it that way, you have to let me know in advance, and we have to figure out a way that I could actually grade this properly. As you'll see later on, I'm going to have a grading rubric for this. And having a video or other things might divert from the grading rubric. So I just want to make sure that it's clear as to how you're going to get evaluated on this. So some people have done podcasts, some people have done videos, some people have done other things also. Okay, I'm just going to look at the questions here. So can we use a class material for the blog to branch out? Yes, definitely. So even though I'm asking you to do some reading responses, if there's pertinent information on what we're discussing, I want to make sure that you're understanding the topics. So it's not just about kind of just cherry picking information to put in because you need to fill out 5 credible sources, but actually about doing proper research and then explaining what the topic is to people so that they could actually engage with that also. How long would the community initiatives blog have to be? So it's the same thing, about 600 words. I guess I didn't put that in the description here. Sorry about that. Oh no, I did actually. So community initiatives blog, about 600 words. So it's about the same as the other blog. But this one is different because this one here, what we're looking at is engaging. So the first one here, Sustainable Choices blog, is about how individuals could make better choices in their food consumption. And you could relate this to more system-related approaches or whatever, but basically the idea is convincing an individual to make specific choices in a way that will actually breed better and sustainable futures related to food. The Community Initiatives blog, I want you to get involved in some kind of a community project. So it could be in your own local environment. It could be, even remotely if possible, because I know some of the groups are even looking for remote work or other things like that. I'm encouraging you all to come to Lachine and actually participate in some of the ventures that are here, because I could actually meet you in person and participate with you. But also, I'm really looking to improve this community when it comes to food. And in other versions of this course, we've actually looked at improving the Concordia community. But a lot of the food groups at Concordia are not in existence now, or not necessarily functioning because of COVID. And I know a lot of groups in Lachine especially are looking for people to actually volunteer and to help out. So what does that mean? It means you could get involved in a food bank or a collective garden or a community kitchen or other things that are related. And we could discuss that later on. So don't worry too much right now if you don't know what you want to do. And like I said, if you don't live in Lachine and it's really far for you to get to, and it's just not possible for you to do that, I'm open to other things also. So you could actually get involved in your own community. Or you could get involved, like let's just say you don't live in Canada right now and you're doing this course remotely from another country. You could do something in your own country or wherever you are, and that would count also. Okay, so will there be a blog platform linked to the class where we're going to post our entries? So do we have to do 2 separate blogs? Yes, you're doing 2 blogs. One is the Community Food Initiatives blog, one is the Sustainable Choices blog, so you're doing 2 of them, okay? And like I said, where you're going to upload this is you're going to upload it to the Google Drive. Later on, we might create some kind of a class website or something if you actually want to publish the blogs, or we could do it on Facebook or any other social media. But the place you're going to be putting the blogs is on the due date. You're going to be uploading it to, oops, sorry, the wrong part. But you're going to be uploading it to the assignment section of the Google Drive and also emailing it to the address that I put at the top of my webpage that basically goes to me for this course. So here, upload assignments, and you're going to go to where the food blog is due and basically just upload it to here. And when the due date comes and the due time, I'm basically just going to close the ability for people to be able to interact with this drive so that I know who submitted what at what time, and basically just upload it here. And then we'll have a further discussion if you actually do want to publish this somewhere. That would be great, because the idea basically is to get the information into the community, so we can discuss that later on. So are you looking for a certain amount of sources in our blogs? So yeah, you could see actually even in the write-ups here, I'm looking for 5 reliable, valid, credible sources, okay? So 5 sources is grounds for me to give you an A. And like you'll see in the grading rubric, depending on your sources and the reliability and validity of your sources, then part of your grade is going to be that also. So those are 2 assignments here, your food choices blog, as well as the community food initiatives blog. And they're both worth 15%. Then we have an interview with a food organization in Lachine, okay? So what is this about? Well, what I'm looking to do with the city of Lachine is actually map the food initiatives in Lachine. In 2014, there was a report that was done, and I'll share it with you. It's mainly, actually the report is done in French, so those of you that could read and write in French, that's great. You don't need to do any reading or writing in French for this interview here, but basically there was a report done mapping out the food system in Lachine, and it's out of date, and what we're looking to do is actually map out a food system, and then basically from our map, we're gonna look at ways to devise a better sustainable food system. So what does that mean altogether? Well, I'm just going to show you another page really quickly here. So, and I'm going to get into this and show you some of the research that I've done, but if we're looking at food systems mapping, here is one way to map out food systems, and I've done this actually mapping out all of the food groups at Concordia University. So if you could see, and here, what I've done is I've looked at all the groups that are production groups. So who produces food on campus at Concordia? We have groups that grow food on campus at Concordia, and all of these groups grow food. Groups that grow food off campus. There are groups that grow food off campus. And then there's a group here that actually does foraging in and around Concordia. So all of these lead to food production. There's groups that actually lead to knowledge production. So some groups do educational activities. All of these groups do that. And some groups do conferences. These groups produce knowledge. Some people say, I do not see what you are showing. Hopefully it is screen, oh shoot, okay. So it might be screen sharing another page here. Sorry. Let me see if I can share this page or, okay. I just stopped screen sharing for a second and I'm going to try to share the other screen here. Okay, sorry about that. So hopefully now you see what I'm seeing, and thank you for pointing that out in the chat. Okay, so here, like I was saying, we have groups that produce food on campus. We have groups that produce knowledge on campus. We have groups that do processing, so looking at food transformations. Okay, so these groups here do cooking, they do other things as well, but basically they transform food on campus. We have groups that do distribution. So we have groups that are market-based, which means that they sell their food, like the Hive Cafe, Solidarity Co-op, Reggie's Co-op. These groups here no longer exist, but used to be food distributors on campus. These are market-based ones. And then we have non-market-based ones. So what does that mean? Well, it means actually you're not purchasing food directly from them, but many of these groups are actually fee levy groups, like the People's Potato, where you pay like $10 a whole year in order to get free food every day during the fall and winter semester. You don't need to pay any money when you're actually getting the food. So why are these ones important? They're actually important when we're looking at food security, is that it actually gives people access to food. So these are food distributors. Then we also have other things like grocery store outlets. So, you know, we have things that are market-based and non-market-based, but places that you could go and buy things like seedlings at the seedling sale. You could go to City Farm School farmers markets or the Concordia farmers markets, and you could purchase food there. But also non-market based is that there's places that donate food, like the People's Potato have a food bank, Mother Hubbard, you could actually get vouchers for free food, and then other things also, City Farm School donate food. So these are good to map out because you could find where people could actually get food like food bank stuff without necessarily paying money. Then I also mapped out all the waste management initiatives. So these things here are things that are waste management, either like in the way of reusable dishes, compostable packaging, bring your own dish incentive programs, or other food incentive programs or educational campaigns. And then I've mapped out also all of the support and advocacy groups at Concordia. So this is an example of information that we could then put together with the interviews that you have done, okay? So once you've done all your interviews with the groups, what I'm gonna do is take these interviews and then go back to the city of Lachine. If anyone's interested in participating in this process too, you're welcome to, but this is gonna be once the course is done. And then we're gonna actually devise these maps based on the information that you're providing. So you all through your assignments are gonna have a practical fashion in improving and making a food system more sustainable in a local environment. And hopefully as I do the course more often, people will then participate in this and do this in other boroughs in Montreal or other places as well. And the idea basically is not just to learn about food and sustainability, but to really improve the local food conditions and make them more sustainable through the actions of our classroom. So just an example here, I've interviewed all of these groups. You could actually get all the information on this page, but basically the interviews are in the form of video interviews. I'm not requiring you do video interviews. I did this because I'm quite media savvy and I think this was the best way to display the information to the general public. But for you all, you're probably just gonna interview people either remotely or in person, whatever you're comfortable with. And then you're gonna summarize in a research report the findings of your interview. So don't worry, I'll explain this more as the class goes on. Other things we could look at too, and I don't know if this is going to be in the purview of this course, but just to show you that we could look at geographical mapping. So students of mine have actually done geographical mapping of all of the food groups at Concordia. And you can see through this page here, you can actually locate the different food groups, or we even did advocacy groups and other things as well, and find out where they are physically on campus by just clicking on links here. So for example, where's Mother Hubbard's? Oh, look, there it is. Where's the People's Potato? Oh, look, there it is. Great. So these kind of things are possible also in our project, but what I would like to do is more qualitative information to build the other food system, basically looking at kind of mapping the food system out. And then if you just want to look at other things, so this is a project that is the bulk of my PhD research. I devised the Concordia Food Groups project and mapped out all of the campus community food groups at Concordia, and then had discussions with these groups also about improving food systems on campus and basically what I call building a food sovereign campus. And you can actually see here the way that I've done these reports is very much like a research report, and is the way that I'm going to be expecting you to do this with your interviews also is in the fashion of a research report, which I'm not going to get into, too much right now, but just to show you what this breaks down into is you have an introduction. So why is this important? And then basically the goals, because this is an action research project. So what were we actually trying to accomplish? And then what were the questions? And then basically kind of mapping out the logistics and participants, procedures, so that people know how that we actually went about doing the study itself. And then I have a results section. So to the extent of like, what did people even say during the discussion? So what is your experience with the food system at Concordia? This is basically what people were writing on the page. And I summarized also the discussion here. And then after all of the questions, I have a discussion section where I kind of provide a summary. So this is the kind of conclusion / summary of the findings. And then here, like you see, I have a couple links to it. And then what I did is actually provided the raw data also. The raw data basically is what people at the tables were writing and kind of elements of their discussion here. So I'll go over this again later on, but I'm going to ask you to write the final report in the way of a research project report like this. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my web page here. Okay, so hopefully you could all see that, and if you can't, just let me know in the chat area. So that's the interview with the food organization. We'll go into more detail, like I said, next class. I'll have all of the breakdown of the grading rubric and the expectations for these assignments, okay? So I'm just going through an overview right now, and you're gonna get into more detail later on about them. So the other thing I'm going to be requiring you do is a reading summary 3 times. So they're worth 10 points each, total of 30 points. And basically what I'm gonna do is a week before the reading summary is due, I'm gonna give you a question. And then based on all of the readings that you've accumulated until that moment, you're gonna answer the question to the best of your ability, okay? So it's like about a page or so. I'm asking you to incorporate 1 external resource, okay? Why? Because I want you to relate this to the bigger picture also. So it means use the readings that you've done in class, but use something that I know that you can relate the material to the external world and to basically either other readings or other things that are going on in the world or other things that are relevant to the topic, okay? So I'll provide a question and then you have a week to respond. Basically just send me the response to your question, tie in the readings, and just answer the question. So that's gonna be 3 times, and each of the dates here I have put up. So these are the assignments that you're going to be getting. And here's a breakdown of the letter grade equivalency. So as you can see here, what each of the grades are. I can see people are posting in the chat. Sorry, I'm just trying to upload. There we go. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to find out how to get to this chat. There we go. Okay, how many words for the reading response? So I would say about 600 to 1,000 words also. I'm not going to be counting your words, but we have to make this manageable for all of us in the way that I'm going to have 65 students, and there's quite a few written assignments. Considering that I have to manage my time, but at the same time also I want quality work out of all of you. So I would say about 600 to 1,000 words, and I'll be a little bit more clear when it comes to the grading rubric, exactly what I'm looking for. So I'd rather you cover certain points rather than just counting your words. But this will be explained next class when I give you your reading, grading rubrics and all that stuff. So just built into the webpage also, I have provided all of these different links, and I'm going to do this for each of the classes so that it's as easy as possible for you to access all of the information for this course. So for example, here you got June 29th. June 29th, we have a Google Drive for this class, which has the attendance and it has the different discussions that we're going to be participating in. I have download the PowerPoint lecture, which actually I haven't even begun to go through yet. So you could download that here. There's also the Zoom link for the course. Obviously, if you're here now, you found the link somewhere. But I'm going to post this for every course. The day before the course, I'm going to post the Zoom link so that you could actually get the Zoom link and then know where to look. So submit in class assignments here. So we're going to have discussions in class, and then you're going to then leave that discussions in the Google Docs form in the Google Drive so that I know where to access everything. And I just provided a link of where you could do that. And then you're going to see the attendance form is here also. So I'm trying to make this as clear and as concise and as easy for you to follow as possible. So all you really need to do is to go to the course, Food and Sustainability, on my webpage, and everything is going to be available for you. And even before the course takes place, so the day before, you're going to have the Zoom link, and then hopefully the night before, or at least a couple hours before the course itself, you'll have the PowerPoint lecture. And then you'll have the other things as well as how to get to the Google Drives and things like that. So just to go through the different topics. So the first little while we're going to be reading from the critical perspectives in food and sustainability. So we have chapters coming up looking at defining and deconstructing what food and sustainability means. So I think this is a very good starting point. We're going to look at different theories and understandings when it comes to understanding what a sustainable food system is and actually actualizing them, not just understanding, but actually creating them. We're going to move on to aspects of building food sovereignty. Like I'm going to be describing in more detail later on, if we're looking at building better food systems, if we're actually looking at addressing the root causes of the problems with our food system, we're actually looking at building food sovereign frameworks, okay? And this differs from just providing food security. So food security is basically giving people access to food, which is great if people are in dire need of food, but doesn't necessarily address the root causes of why people are malnourished or why people are not getting food. According to the Food and Agriculture Association, presently with the amount of food that's been produced, we could feed the world 1.5 times over. But there are about 900 million people in the world, close to 1 billion people still starving, okay? So if that's the case, well, what's causing the starvation? It's not food production, it's a lot about distribution and access, which is rooted into our political economy of food. So providing charity is good as a temporary solution, but as a long-term solution about building sustainable food networks where actually people are able to reproduce their own food capabilities, charity work doesn't necessarily provide these things. So we're looking at actually building food sovereign networks. We're giving people the empowerment to build their own food networks and to produce food for themselves and other things like that. So food sovereignty is important, and we're going to look at different areas of food sovereignty and what that means also, and compare them and contrast them with other food movements that are out there in the world. Then we're going to look at what I call Recipe for Sustainable Foods. So here we're actually looking at the other book that I showed you, which is the Nourished Planet book. This one here looks at different ways of measuring sustainability. So they're going to look at the double food pyramids and other things of actually a way to assess environmental and social sustainability of food networks. So this is really good for looking at individual choices. The first book is really good looking at definitions. And then later on, the last book, Foodie's Guide to Capitalism, we're going to be looking at more system approaches and food and basically how it's been rooted into society, into the framework and the fabric of, basically looking at social inequalities and looking at, especially today, looking at racism. Food is a really, a very important way to look at systemic racism, because a lot of the slaves that were brought over to Canada and the United States and to the islands were actually directly for food production on plantations and other things as well. And were actually integrated into the fabric of how we've created our food system itself. It was basically built on slavery. And I would say to the extent of today, if we want to look at structural racism, food is one of the best examples to look at that. Not best and positive, it's actually a very negative context. But look at how food is being produced in Canada and the extent of migrant laborers that are coming and putting themselves in very dangerous conditions for us to be able to get food at very low costs, as well as the conditions that people are put in across the world to provide food under the true cost of the food. So we're going to be looking at that in the later portion. But anyway, so here we're going to be looking at I guess more kind of individual and social mechanisms of defining how food relates to global sustainability. And here you're going to see your first reading responses due. And all you got to do is click on this link, and that link provides you another web page that will bring you to a place to upload your assignment. So here we have another chapter of the same book here, The Nourished Planet. We're going to be looking at food and sustainable growth, because this is another thing about our economic system. Food is a very big part of it. Canada is actually one of the largest agricultural exporters. We're going to learn what that means altogether and what it means actually for our food sovereignty ourselves in Canada. But basically, there are ways to discuss growth and ways to grow food initiatives that are actually better for us and the planet and our social systems also. Things that I guess I'm not mentioning, which I probably should be, there's different activity themes for the weeks also. So you're going to notice actually the first activity theme is growing a plant and growing seedlings. So what I'm going to do is each class, we're going to have a different activity that we're going to be participating in. Okay, so for today, at the end of the day, I'm going to ask you to plant a seed of some sort. You might say, where the heck can I get a seed? Well, if you have a vegetable at home, or more of a fruit, I guess. If you have a fruit like, a pepper, or if you have a tomato or anything like that, there's seeds right in there. You could actually use them. If you want to, and you want to go venture out and get seeds from other places because you have a specific plant that you want to grow, then that's great. You could do that also. But basically today, I'm going to set you up to plant a seed. You're going to need earth of some sort with some forms of nutrients that will sustain plant life. And you're going to need a seed, and you're going to do that hopefully at the end of this class. And then we're going to talk about this next class, and then we're going to talk about how to care for your plant. So as you see, we're going to actually be participating together in these different experiments, and I'm going to provide you tutorials about how to do some of the stuff. And at the same time, we're going to talk about the results of our experiment each class. So growing plants, plant care, we're going to be talking about balcony and food growing and gardening. So people that have their own yard space or balconies, or even indoors if you have access to a window or some grow lights. And you could also grow some food there. So July 13th, we're going to be looking at transforming. So we're going to be looking at cooking. This is probably one of the more common things for you all. You probably cook of some sort. Maybe it's just heating up for a lot of you, but some of you maybe are engaged more into cooking things from scratch with raw ingredients and other things as well. So great. So food for sustainable growth, we already went over, but one of the major thing we're going to be looking at there is transforming and preserving food. So have people actually been able to can things? Do you know how to preserve things in vinegar and pickle them? Do you know how to ferment food also? So food fermentation is a very great way to preserve food over time. If anyone wants to participate in an experiment with me, I could show you how to make sun pickles really easily, and they're fermented. So basically it's taking pickles in a salt water brine and leaving them outside for a couple days. So it's actually very simple to do. And then when it comes to July 20th, we're going to look at then transitioning to Holt Gimenez's book, A Foodie's Guide to Capitalism, where we're going to discuss more systemic approaches to understanding food and sustainability. So Eric Holt Gimenez, has most of the authorship that he has participated in addresses root causes of our food problems. So why do we have global malnourishment when we have more food to feed the world over? What is it about our political and economic systems that prevent people from getting food? Anyhow, there's a lot more to it, but we're going to read his book. But at the same time here, we're going to look at food transformation. I'm going to get you to make a sourdough from scratch also. A lot of people are intimidated by baking bread and other things, so we're going to do this, and I'm going to show you how to do it without using yeast, with basically making your own sourdoughs. So we're going to look at the history of food and sustainability, and the activity for that day is going to be baking bread. So I'm going to show you how to bake bread, and we're going to look at baking bread together. People that have gluten intolerance, we could actually bake bread that is gluten-free or other forms that will cater to your diets. It's one of the more fundamental things that people do is basically, buy bread or make things with bread, but not a lot of people know how to make bread, which is, quite of a staple product. So then we're going to look at food commodities. So food commodities, we've commodified things that are actually natural. Okay? Food itself grows naturally in the environment. You don't need to commodify food for food to exist. But what we've done is we brought it into our political economic system and commodified it in a way that the only people that'll get access to it are people with money. In order to get money, you have to put in your labor into the capitalist system in order to afford food. So the commodification of food actually has major implications. Is basically it restricts access for people to obtain food. And actually, if we're looking at food commodities, the whole idea of GMOs is actually about commodifying food and not making it not necessarily a common thing, but things that even farmers need access to patents and or purchasing seeds and other things that go with the seeds, like pesticides and other things that help them grow. But basically, all of these things have been commodified. So the farmers actually pay a lot of money, which is making farming very unsustainable at the same time. So we're going to deconstruct this and get a little bit more into this also. But what I would encourage you to do is go look at farmers markets. Okay, so if you have some around you, that's great. There are different solidarity farmers markets that are not necessarily kind of like the Jean Talon or Atwater markets, but are more smaller markets that actually provide to more local players. These are the ones that I would like you to go and venture out to. But also, you know, if you live by the Jean Talon market or Atwater market or other more traditional markets, venture to there also and do a little bit of exploration. So then we're going to move on to food, land, and property. So kind of going along with food commodification. Well, what does it mean to see food in the way of its relationship to land and property? You know, back before capitalism, we're looking at feudalism and more monarchical societies. People were more in contact with their food. And I'm not saying this in a way that the societies were actually more egalitarian or better. There's a lot of debate over that, and definitely there was a lot of oppression during those times too, in different forms. But basically, the way that our food system has progressed or basically grown out of is the separation of people from their natural environments. People, even in feudal societies, were more engaged with their food. They grew food together. Actually, in different places in the world that are kind of more feudalistic or less capitalistic, people are still more engaged with producing food. Actually, apparently, according to the Food and Agriculture Association, or sorry, organization, 70% of our food is actually produced by small farmers, which means that a lot of families are still engaged into the process. It might be hard to see that from Canada or the United States, but actually, if you're looking worldwide, our food is produced by still farming families and small farms. But basically, separating people from their land separates them from their ability to reproduce themselves. So we no longer have the ability to produce ourselves communally, because by separating people from their land and basically having private property, we now have to rely on markets. We need to rely on capitalist institutions to provide food. There are exceptions. We could have balcony gardens, we could have our gardens in the backyard, but that doesn't sustain the majority of our eating. The majority of our eating has been caused by the separation of ourselves from our own livelihood, from our ability to reproduce ourselves. So we're going to take a look at that. We're going to look at food and agriculture. So what does agriculture really mean? What is agriculture in Canada? How do farms exist in the world? How is this either, you know, part of sustainable or non-sustainable ways and modes of production? So we're going to look at food and agriculture, and at the same time, I'm going to introduce you to the idea of CSA basket. So CSA is a community-sponsored agriculture, and one way that you could actually look at reproducing yourself is by making a partnership with a farm. So there are certain farms that offer CSA baskets, and basically what you're doing is you're buying a share of the produce, and you're guaranteeing the farmer that they're going to have clients throughout the year. So it guarantees them a livelihood, and basically what it does is all the redistribution of their farm, or basically all the produce, gets redistributed to the people on CSA baskets. I've been on CSA baskets over the summers for quite a long time, and my experience is you get a lot more than you're paying for. Usually you're getting way better variety or not variety necessarily, but you're getting way more plentiful bounties of food than you would at a grocery store for the bang for your buck, I guess, if you're looking at it that way. But you're also helping sustain the farmers' livelihoods, which I'm going to show you later on. It's very difficult for certain farmers in Canada or, you know, other places in North America to sustain themselves because of the contracts with these big multinational food players. So one way off of that is by encouraging people to have CSA baskets where they're taking a partnership with the farmer and receiving part of the bounty every week or every 2 weeks, depending on when the CSA baskets come in. And different CSA baskets have different stipulations and are managed differently by different farms. But this is one way to get organic produce, because most of these farms are organic farms and smaller farms than other places that actually sell to major grocery stores. So I'm going to encourage you to look at CSA baskets and to highly consider going to the CSA basket model. Presently, I don't do CSA baskets because, like I'll show you, I have quite an extensive garden of my own and try to reproduce as much as I can through my own gardening endeavors. Then we're going to look at food, race, gender, and class relations and food. So one thing that I was talking about is power and privilege in food systems. We do not pay the true cost of food in Canada. We're paying way less than the true cost because we're not necessarily accounting for a lot of the pollution that's not being cleaned up. We're not accounting for the extent of paying migrant laborers very cheap wages and not covering their health care when they're getting COVID, or other things that basically we wouldn't be able to get away with when we're employing people from Canada under the labor conditions that we have in Canada. A lot of our food is imported food, and actually a lot of the conditions of labor are quite appalling when we actually deconstruct this. So like I'm saying, and especially with today's world, if we're looking at race relations and privilege and power, food is one of the more prominent ways to actually get people to understand this, but also things that we're going to need to deconstruct and to readdress if we actually want to build a better, more equitable world for us all. So that is part of what we're going to be discussing also. And the activity theme is going to be waste management. I haven't made an exact plan as to what we're going to do there, but we're going to look at different ways of repurposing food and other things as well, and composting and different things that we could do at home. All right, so then we're going to look at alternative food networks. Activity theme, I said waste management again. Between these two classes, I'm going to come up with something before that. I just, I guess, didn't necessarily know exactly what I wanted to do in that regard, but we'll find out soon enough. But yeah, so we're going to look at alternative food networks. So I don't want you to come out of this with doom and gloom scenarios. Like I was saying before, how we engage with the world with our labor and with our consumption habits creates conditions to bring about better things in the world, better food endeavors. We could create alternative food networks, or we could participate in the ones that exist and bring about better conditions. So it's not just about relying or dwelling on the bad parts of what I'm describing in this class, but actually taking an active approach to doing something different and participating in alternative food networks and bring about better conditions in our world, especially when it comes to food, but also all of these topics relate to a lot of the major topics that are coming to the forefront today of our political and economic crises. And, especially with the pandemic going on and all of these other things coming about, is basically kind of noticing the cracks in the political and economic system that we're built, is we're gonna have to start addressing these things, and there are ways to do it. So I'm going to empower you all to address the problems in ways that hopefully you're able to do on your own and, engage collectively also. And then the 12th, we're going to talk about transformative food systems. So kind of playing off this idea of alternative food networks, we're going to look at more transformative approaches. So how do we actually build better food systems? And we're actually going to discuss food systems also. And hopefully you all have your interviews done, because it's due before this class. And we can actually discuss how your assignment fits into the larger food system in Lachine, and basically what your learnings are about food systems. So these are all of the classes in a nutshell. And I am just kind of rambling on here. Usually I like to kind of flip it back to you all to have discussions, but I'm going to go through the rest of the course, and then I'm going to do that at the end, just because I guess it's going to be more complicated to kind of flip it back to everybody right now. But if you ever have any questions, just feel free to post them in the question, whatever, the chat room, and I'll just address your questions here. So late assignment policy, here I'm saying, quite strictly that I'm not going to accept late assignments without adequate documentation. Look, I'm a very reasonable person. Just let me know what's going on. I know that the world right now is not necessarily the way it was about 6 months ago. I know you're all maybe stressed about employment and all these other things, and maybe you have other things going on in your lives. Just communicate with me, please, okay? If you can't get an assignment in for the time that I'm asking for it, don't tell me like 2 minutes before. Just let me know a week before, whatever the case is, and we'll figure this out together. I'm very reasonable, very approachable, and I could be flexible considering, the context of the world right now. So I'm saying I'm not going to accept any late assignments, but I probably will if you ask me in advance. Just don't do it at the moment that it's due. Because I'm managing my time through it all this also. Here I provided a list of resources. Some of these things are useful to you. Maybe some of them might not be, because I know that some of them might be closed now. I don't know if some of these things are working virtually. But anyhow, so here's a list of resources that might be helpful to you or not. So academic rights and responsibilities here, you could just read through this. Plagiarism, don't copy off other people, If you're going to paraphrase, please refer to the author that you're paraphrasing from, or if you're taking a direct quote from somewhere, please provide the adequate resource for the direct quote. If you have questions about plagiarism, just let me know in advance. I don't mind helping you out with this. If you actually want to go to the academic integrity resource here, I provided a link to it also. Students with disabilities, if you have any kind of conditions or any kind of situation that is going to make it difficult for you to participate or to engage with us, or any kind of issues that you may have, just let me know, okay? And you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be from a doctor's note or anything like that. Look, I understand that some people may be more stressed or be more anxious in today's world because of different circumstances that you're facing because of COVID or because of other things. But anyhow, so I'm quite flexible and reasonable. Just let me know what's going on. So safe space, virtual classroom. We're going to be discussing stuff together. And like I'm saying, this course is very heavy topics, okay? So we're going to discuss different people's opinion, and I'm going to make it a climate so that hopefully we can have honest dialogue with each other. What I do not want to happen in any of the dialogue is any kind of like name calling or verbal assaults or any kind of anything that would be considered bullying. But at the same time, these are safe space classrooms, is that we do not use derogatory language. We do not use anything that would be, you know, considered racist, sexist, homophobic, or anything like that. I don't want people to question other people's existence. And what does that mean? Well, we're going to be discussing privilege. And, you know, part of this has to do with white privilege. And I don't want this to come into the context of discussing that, no, this doesn't exist and whatever, people should just go and back to living, you know, oppressive lifestyles. That is not the case. We're actually going to be deconstructing these things, and we're going to actually look at how they exist, not whether they exist or not. And food is a really, really prominent way to actually look at structural racism and deconstruct this. So, you know, part of it is not like, oh, well, oppression doesn't work for me and all these people should just be quiet about this, but actually about listening to people's experience and, you know, sharing if that is your experience also, and having people understand these things from structural points of view or even individual points of view. Maybe this is the experience that you're feeling or whatever the case is. But denying people's right to exist is not okay in a safe space classroom, okay? Anyhow, look, I think everything will be fine when it comes to this. I've never had issues before. But like I'm saying, the discussions that we're going to be participating in are discussions that you're going to be doing in breakout rooms. And then part of the idea of a breakout room is that you're going to be writing on the Google template and you're going to be answering questions to each other. And we're going to be discussing these things with each other. And you're not going to be recorded during that time, because I want the conversations to be fruitful conversations where people don't necessarily you know, feel that they're going to be recorded and broadcast to the world because maybe they don't understand certain topics or whatever the case is. Okay, I see that there's been some discussion here on the chat. I'm a little bit late onto that. So easy growing techniques, I see. Oh, sorry, I've missed a whole bunch of stuff here. Is it too late to grow certain things? No, it's not. We're going to get into this anyway, so I'm going to get into the growing later on. I'm going to skip those questions for now. And I see some people asking about growing techniques for different things. Tomatoes are kind of late to plant in the game right now, although you probably get a tomato plant. It might not give you very good tomatoes. You could propagate lettuce right now, yes. And actually any kind of greens you could actually start right now. I'm going to get into this a little bit later, so I'm not going to get into these questions in the chat presently. What I'm going to do is actually go through some of the course material and then actually get into some discussions, because I've been rambling now for about an hour and a bit, and I would like to actually hear from you all also. Just a couple things before we move on, and if you want to, you could post this in the Zoom chat. Does anyone have any questions about the course itself and the course content before I move on? Okay, I do not see anybody, so I'm going to move on.
I just have one question.
Oh, okay, I hear somebody. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to know, for the discussion questions and stuff like that, do we copy it and make our own Google Doc and then just add it into the same folder with the discussion questions? Or is there like a certain way that you'd like us to answer the questions and post them?
Yes, so the first thing is that you're going to copy the template. So the template is you could copy and paste it. You can't work off the template, but you copy it, you make a new Google Doc and basically call it whatever. So you're going to name your group. And then afterwards at the top, you're going to put everybody's names, so all the names of the participants. From that, basically, you just kind of fill in the discussion questions, but it's going to be a different form than the template. So you create your own Google Doc and you're going to save it into that folder. So at the end of this class, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so the folder is only viewable, but not editable anymore. And then I could then assess what's going on. Basically, I'm going to look at the responses that you've given.
And the group, is it a group that you decide the participants in it, or just like it's random, or we choose?
So the group is actually going to be, and I've never tried this here before, but I'm going to do breakout groups. So you're going to participate in a breakout group that is going to be determined here by Zoom. And this is the first time I try a breakout group. So we're going to see how this functions all together, but I've done a lot of research on this and it seems that it's quite straightforward. So if there's any bugs in this, we're gonna have to figure it out. I'm gonna try to bounce around between different breakout groups. I don't know how this functions, like I'm saying, so I'm gonna have to figure this out as we're doing it, but it seems quite straightforward. So you'll be randomly assigned to a group, and every class is gonna be a different group of people, and you're gonna have discussions with that group, and I'll give you adequate amount of time to get through the questions, and then I'm gonna bounce back and forth to make sure you're all doing it properly. I see a question here. If we're not fully sure about some of the assignment requirements, such as food mappings, will we discuss further near the due date? Yes. So I'm going to provide you on not Excel, sorry, a PowerPoint presentation, the exact requirements that you're going to be looking to do your assignment. So it's going to have the grading rubric. It's going to have all of the things to guide you to do it. And then I'm going to go through this in detail with you. So I know you have a lot of questions right now as to what to do. Don't worry, we're going to get to those questions in good time. I would like to do the majority of the assignments or gear you to do them as of next class, which is next Monday. If we have time to do that, all of them next Monday, I'll do that. But if we have time to go through the majority of them and then maybe the last couple ones the next class, we'll do that. But you're going to be briefed on them very, very shortly. And I wouldn't worry about the contents of them right now. We'll get to that later on. Okay, so before I move on from the course, I'm just gonna kind of show you a little bit about what I do particularly, and then I'm gonna flip it to ask you all about yourselves also. It's gonna be the first discussion. So I'm gonna share my screen with you on another page. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to go to this page for now. So if you want to find out a bit more about me, you could go to my webpage. And if you go to the top, you could see biography. I'm going to tell you about some of the things I was going to show you, but I don't think we're going to have time for that. So I don't want to take up too much time discussing who I am. But basically, I am been teaching at Concordia as a part-time professor for 9 years now. I've taught this course for about 2 years. And I've taught other sociology, anthropology related courses. So I've taught food and culture. I'm actually teaching about urban agriculture through the geography department. I actually teach in 6 different departments, go figure. But my main specialties are about food and sustainability. I also teach about media and technology. So I've actually taught media technology and politics, and I teach in the comms department also. My master's degree is actually looking at the effects of advertising. And I moved, my PhD is actually looking at food studies and setting up sustainable food systems. So it seems it's divergent, but basically on our capitalist political and economic systems and mode of functioning. And a lot of my research has kind of been looking at alternatives to these systems. So basically, that's what I mainly teach about, but I also teach in psychology because that's kind of where I got my stardom. My master's degree was in psychology and communication studies. And I actually still enjoy looking at theories of motivation and social psychology. So these are the 2 courses in psychology that I still teach. Although it's not maybe what I study presently, it's things that I find really interesting that actually pertain to the other topics that I discuss. So, you could find out if you want to know the courses that I'm teaching or have taught, you could scroll down on my page and find that out. and actually put all the courses that I will be teaching. I teach in the SCPA, I teach about community and local activism, and I'm actually teaching a course about social enterprise development and social entrepreneurship as well, coming in the winter 2021. And in the fall, I'm teaching social psychology and urban agriculture. So you can find out about that as well. So I'm actually a PhD student, and I'm kind of in the last stretch of finishing my thesis right now. My thesis looked at the involvement of Concordia food groups on campus, or basically campus community food groups, and the impact of a food system in local environments. So I'm looking at how do we devise a food sovereign campus, and how does that actually improve the local communities in and around Concordia. And you could actually look at that by going to concordiafoodgroups.ca. I have all of these interviews that I was showing you before, and I've mapped out the food systems and all of these things. Other things I've done is actually I founded a media co-op in 2014. 2014? No, actually, sorry, 2004. It's been a long time now. 2004. So it's called Co-op Collective Vision. What I wanted to do back then is actually empower youth to create their own media. And I was teaching in different schools across Montreal. So I set up media education courses for youth and taught them to empower themselves by actually creating their own content. And this was important to me because I was actually working in various elementary schools and high schools, and realized actually the teachers, their media education or media literacy was about how the kids were negatively impacted by media. So listening to rap music is bad, and this is bad, and that's basically what the teachers were saying. And it was very disempowering for the students. So what I did is actually created a way for them to empower themselves by creating their own content and learning through engaging. So if you want, you could check out the Co-op Collective Vision. We usually have a summer camp where kids come and make movies, but that's not happening this summer because of COVID. You know, I do other things in this realm also. So actually I'm quite engaged into media education, media literacy. I'm also engaged into post-capitalist futures. So I devised a website with some people about 2 years ago, looking at how we could transition away from capitalism. And now actually looking at kind of a post-COVID world, it looks like some of these things are even more possible on the macrocosm because a lot of our supply chains have broken down or are in the process of doing so. And it looks like a post-COVID world might look a lot different. It might look like social structures may actually have to be part of our economic system and not just an adjunct to it. What do I mean by that is when people cannot make their livelihoods off labor, it's going to be very difficult unless they get some basic assistance as to actually even perpetuate the economic system that we've developed. You know, if people cannot pay their rents, what happens to an economic system? What happens when people can't actually consume in the economic system we devised? Their businesses come crashing down also. And now that the economy, or whatever we want to call it, is reopened in Quebec, we're going to actually, you know, see some of these industries, if they're going to withstand this test here. Are restaurants going to be able to survive after when they actually have to reduce the amount of people coming in? And, you know, or is this post-capitalist world going to be conducive to the political and economic system that we've had before? So these are the questions that I was asking, and actually interviewed a bunch of people about post-capitalist possibilities. So if you're interested in some of that, that's great also. Anyhow, look, I'm not going to get too much more into myself. I would like to flip this into more of a participatory session. So you could just read more about me if you want to, if you're interested. But I'm not going to continue much more there. Okay, so what I'm going to do though, is I'm going to flip this around and I'm going to have you participate with each other through different breakout rooms. And just to show you the questions, the first question that I'm going to ask you all is this here. So hopefully you could see my PowerPoint slide. So just a quick introduction. I'm going to give you all, I don't know if 15 minutes is going to be appropriate. I've never done this online before. I usually do this in person. I could read the room fairly well. And I usually give people about 10, 15 minutes. I'm going to assign 15 minutes to the breakout group. If I feel that it's too much, then I'm going to probably rein you in if I can faster. But just don't worry, you have 15 minutes. And you know, if there's not enough time, then I'll know that for the next time. But here are the questions at the beginning. So I want you to get to know the people in your group a little bit. I want you to connect with each other in some kind of a fashion. So take a minute or two just to introduce yourselves to the group. Why are you part of this course? You know, what interests you in food and sustainability, whatever you want to talk about. But more importantly also, what type of food consumer are you? So what, do you try to prioritize things that are more local based? Do you do CSA baskets? Are you interested in fair trade? Are you interested in things that are reduced packaging? What kind of things do you actually consume? Maybe you haven't even thought about this yet, and that's okay also. The other thing you're going to talk about is, do you have any specific dietary needs? Some people might be vegetarian, vegan, whatever the case is. You might have food allergies. You might have, religious context, why you eat or don't eat certain foods. Those are things that you could discuss also. Are you a conscientious food consumer? So are you actually actively engaged into understanding food systems and how to improve your food systems through your own consumption patterns? Then also, I'd like to know, what experience do you have producing food? Do you have a garden, a farm? Have you done any food production? Because I'm going to be encouraging you all to do that. So I kind of want to know where to start from. What experience do you have transforming and processing food? I bet you all have been processing a lot more food since all the restaurants have been closed. So maybe you've learned how to cook a little bit and maybe not. Or maybe, you have done this for your whole life. Maybe you're part of a family that cooks a lot of food. Anyway, so I'd like to know more about your transforming processing capabilities. What kind of experience do you have preserving food? So have you ever done fermenting or canning or pickling or other things? Some people dehydrate their food, some people freeze it. But the idea basically, especially in Canada, is a lot of the food that's being produced, we don't have a preservation mechanism. It's very hard to actually sustain ourselves over long periods of time, especially if we're trying to self-preserve. What experience do you have with waste management? So what about composting or repurposing or other things also? There's many ways to do that. In my own garden, I try to compost things and actually reuse that to make new soil. So I don't necessarily have to go and purchase soil anymore, but I'm actually making compost teas and repurposing and composting a lot of the food scraps that I have or other things. Great, so these are the questions that I'm gonna have you ask. I'm gonna break you off into breakout rooms, which is gonna be extremely random. At first, you're gonna probably not know the people in your room. First thing you do is you create a Google Doc with all of the people, copy and paste the questions, and then have your discussion. I'm gonna try to bounce around to your groups. If I make it into your group, wonderful. If I don't, it's either because I haven't figured out how to do that yet, or because it's a little bit more complicated and or time consuming, and it's gonna be hard to reach all of you, but I'll do the best I can. At the end, when I end the breakout session, we're gonna come into a larger conversation. So I'm gonna end the recording, and none of this is going to actually be recorded. So feel free to have discussions amongst you all without any fears of being recorded.